Talking about Chelsea, I it was said that Chelsea gave a deadline to Man City to sign Enzo Fernandez. So if they are not going to sign him, by 5 p.m. Friday, which is today, that they should forget about it. I agree with that. Not because I'm a Chelsea fan, because I realized that last season Man City contributed to the downfall of Chelsea. If you look at it critically, you know, they weren't supposed to communicate with any staff of Chelsea, be it player or coach. It's a FIFA rule. If in fact if a player is on his last year, if he's on his last year contract, you can only communicate with such a player when it is like 6 months. He has just 6 months. Even when the player is on his last year, you still can't communicate with such a player until it's about 6 months to the end of his contract. And FIFA approved that because since the club has refused to renew the contract, so that player has a right to start looking for prospective suitors, prospective team that will take him up. So that is the rule of FIFA. But Man City decided to speak to Enzo Moresca while he was the coach of Chelsea, while he was on about 4 year contract. The contract term still remain like 4 years. Now, he told Chelsea that Man City spoke to him. Fine, but that is not enough. They weren't supposed to communicate to you without letting Chelsea know, but they communicated with you. Okay, fine. They have communicated and all of that. So what happened next? Enzo Moresca lost focus. Of course, we know that he has not really loved the arrangement of his working in Chelsea. Chelsea has limited him in terms of, he's a coach. You still have some other appointments. You, the fitness coach or the fitness team decide how many minutes a player can play. There were issues on Cole Palmer when he was injured. He wanted him to play more minutes, but the fitness guys will say, no, 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 he shouldn't play more than 70 minutes and all of that. So once it's 70 minutes, he pulls him out. I know he didn't like those arrangements. He felt, I deserve more. How can you be limiting me? But that was what you agreed by. Those were the terms you signed when you were taking the job. After World Club Cup, it looks like yes, Enzo Maresca has arrived. Chelsea have arrived. So there were that, there were that egocentricity going on, playing out, and it begin to affect how you are deciding that okay, I need this, I need that. At the beginning of the season, you are requesting for a defender, and the team was they were telling him look inward. Livakovic had an injury and it was going to be out of this season, and he requested for a new defender. And Chelsea felt that look, we can't afford that now because UEFA is torchlighting us. UEFA, they are really torchlighting us. So why don't we look inward? And truly, there were two central defenders inward. There were two central defenders in the bomb squad, Renato Veiga and Issa Disasi. You could have picked any of those to manage the situation until Kobe was going to come back and all of that. But he didn't want that. He wanted Chelsea to sign a new central defender. Of course, they never signed, and he was never happy. So when Man City call came, he saw it as, oh, finally, and he didn't manage it well. From that moment that he received that call, his results dwindled. He started performing poorly and all of that. And eventually, he forced himself out of the team. Maybe, some people have said that perhaps he was performing poorly so that Chelsea can sack him. Because we know that Chelsea, once the result was getting bad and bad and bad, they will definitely fire you. So maybe he was doing that so that Chelsea can fire him. But as it happened, these people did not fire him because they believed in him. and realizing that, oh, he had to force his way out of the team. And from that moment, Chelsea season derailed. They brought in Leandro Senior. He couldn't manage the team, and Chelsea eventually finished 10th. All because Man City called, if you ask me. Some other people might say, no, what you are saying is not true. Why would he just attribute everything to just Man City? After all, some teams do sack coaches and they still do well. Chelsea has done that in the past. They have sacked coaches. But in this case, they didn't plan to sack him. They believed in him. They brought him when he was nobody, when nobody believed in him, when nobody really, you know, saw him as someone that was good for the top. Then Chelsea saw him and believed in him. And eventually, how did the whole thing turn out? Never turned out well. He forced his way out because another job was waiting for him, and that affected Chelsea. So I see a repeated scenario here. And that was why Chelsea had to act fast. Enzo Fernandez is not a player you can replace easily. He's a core player. He's a player you build a team around. He plays a major wing in the team. So if you don't settle the season is less than just a week away. And now you don't have your main player, his future sorted. And the truth is, this thing could be dragged. That maybe on the last day of transfer, that was when they will now pay, and Chelsea will now be stuck again. And 3 months, 4 months into the league, everybody will start saying, Chelsea is not doing well again, and they will now say, it was because they lost Enzo Fernandez, and they couldn't replace him, and all of that. Those kind of stories will start flying around again. So that was why they needed to do this. I know I read that Steve McManaman was saying that that was rude. Why would Chelsea be giving a deadline? I understand him. He's speaking as a Man City fan, an ex-Man City player. So it's normal for him to defend his team. But the truth is, Chelsea once beaten twice shy. So they've learned their lesson. They don't want to be caught unaware again. They don't want a situation whereby, you know, what happened last season repeated itself. Even Man City themselves, I remember at the beginning of last season, they needed to sort the issue of what's his name again, their former keeper Ederson. Well, Fenerbahce were interested, and it was draggy because in Turkey their own transfer deadline does not end at September 1st, so they still have like I think extra 3 weeks or something. And they realized that look, we need to sort this. We need to replace him. So if you are going to buy him, you have to do that quickly because the player we want to buy too. Donnarumma was needed a contract. PSG did not give him because they felt they wanted him out, and Man City wanted to grab him to replace Ederson. But Ederson's situation was getting prolonged, so they had to just hurry them. So that was it. So I think that is a very fine decision by Chelsea. Finally, Chelsea is becoming proactive. If you ask me, they are now taking things, the way it should be taken, and not just allowing some other teams affect what happen in your team. And again, a lot of people were saying that why are you strengthening a direct rival? I mean, you are selling Enzo Fernandez to Man City to strengthen Man City. Yes, it looks that is just the way football works. Even if Chelsea did not sell him directly, he could still go to another club where he might still find his way to Man City. We saw what happened with Kevin De Bruyne. Chelsea sold him to Germany, and Man City went there to buy him, and he eventually played a lot of football at Man City. You know, Chelsea. So several of such. But the truth is, if Chelsea were able to get 120 million pounds, as they have said, as they are trying to have, if they're able to get that on Enzo Fernandez, to me, it's a lot of money. They have made profit. They have used him for like 4 years now. They've won World Cup with him, Conference League, and all of that. And they still manage to sell him 120 million pounds. It doesn't matter if he's going to anywhere. He's going to Man City. He's going to Real. Let him go. The most important thing is just replace him well. Chelsea is looking at Alex Scott, Adam Watson, and some other exciting players here and there. So I believe if they're able to replace him, fine. It doesn't matter. He can go to anywhere he wants to go. That's how football works. So game theory masterclass.